Hello, good afternoon, everyone. All of you that are listening to New Hope Radio on 1590 AM dial, 92.7 FM dial, newhopecc.tv, click Facebook or YouTube. Thanks for joining us today. Aaron, our host on Facebook, is here to meet you and to greet you. Check in with him, give your greetings. Robin's checking in, Jennifer's checking in. I love the way I could just see people connecting with us here on our radio program. We got to figure out how to get the radio listeners on AM and FM to check in with us as well. Everybody call Dave Young at WARV and tell him to figure out how can we go video on AM and FM radio. So you call up Dave and say, Dave, let's get it together. Let's get that done, okay? All right, good. I'm sure he'll really appreciate that. But we're glad you're with us today. We're going to begin a brand new series. We're going to look today at the life of Joseph. I'll tell you what, man, there are so many things that we can learn from studying that guy's life. And we are going to learn a lot of things. We're going to learn that life has lessons. Life is filled with lessons. And the first installment on our lesson from the life of Joseph is going to be that, you know what, it's okay to make mistakes as long as you learn from them. Mistakes are teaching tools. So Joseph made some big mistakes. Oh yeah, they got him into some deep trouble. But eventually, he did learn from those mistakes. You know, one of the biggest pains in life is really wasting the pain of failure. Failure is painful, but man, you don't want to waste it. Right, Debbie? Right, Paula? Checking in? I mean, failure has its own pain, but if we don't learn from that failure, you know what it does? It brings us more pain. We're adding pain on top of pain. Why? Because failure has pain, and when we don't learn from our failure, that adds another pain on top of that. So, when you make the same mistakes over and over and over in life and you don't learn anything, you know what you're doing? You're adding to the pain of failure. Let me give you an illustration. Grace, pay attention. Okay. A man was passed over for a promotion in his company. And he was so irate that he was passed over that he went to his boss and he demanded an explanation. And he said to the boss, man, how could you ignore me? And I've been here for I've got 25 years experience with this company. How could you pass me over for a promotion? And his boss said to him, you don't have 25 years of experience. You have 1 year of experience 25 times. Now, what did he mean by that? He meant he never learned anything. He didn't learn and he didn't grow in the company. He just kept making the same mistakes over and over. Now, this brings us to the life of Joseph. He's one who did learn from his mistakes and how to overcome what I would call disastrous circumstances. How do you overcome them? Joseph is going to teach us. In Joseph, you know what we find? A life of, I like this part, no excuses. Joseph is not a guy that made excuses. If you're living a life of excuses for why you do things or do not do what you do, then you're like the guy with 1 year of experience 25 times. Excuses will never get you to where you need to be. Excuses will never help your growth as a maturing individual. Excuses always hold us back and they stop us from facing reality. Now, here is something you might not have considered. The greatest lessons of life do not come with ease. They come with pain. They do. The greatest lessons have caused us some pain. They hurt. And if you fail to realize that, you will be consumed with the pain instead of how to better yourself. Think about that. The greatest lessons in life come with pain. And if you don't realize that, Instead of being consumed with what can I learn, you'll be consumed with the pain. And you'll never change. And you'll never better yourself. And you know what happens when people are consumed with their pain? Here it goes. They stop blaming other people. Now they're making excuses again. Now, this principle is not original with me. The Apostle James, he coined it. He said, listen, when you have negative circumstances in your life, you don't have to be consumed with the pain. You know what he said? You can have joy in your trials. Not because the trials are joyous, because they're not, but because, here it comes, through your faith, they can produce patience. And that patience will make you complete, and you will lack nothing. That you will be a complete person, well-rounded, lacking nothing. So what have we learned so far? That we need to learn from our mistakes, especially our painful ones. Don't be consumed with the pain. Be consumed with what can you learn from what got you there. When James talks about patience, what does patience mean? Patience means I can trust God. I can trust that God is in control when things seem to be out of control. You know that? We can't control everything, but God can control anything. That's walking by faith. And if you're a believer today, and I would imagine most people listening today are believers in Christ because it's a Christian station. And for those that are not believers, that's beautiful. I'm glad you're here. Maybe through the things that you hear all day long here on WARV, they will help you to become a believer. And that'll be good for you. But the Apostle Paul quoted the Old Testament, and he said, listen, the just shall walk by faith. It's what we do. We walk by faith. What does that mean? It means that as we're going through life, as we're going through the day, we're always trusting God. I think we can boil faith down to two simple principles. Number one, I'm trusting God. And number two, I'm abiding in the Scriptures. Those are the two things we need to do. Live in the Scriptures, do what they say, and trust God for the outcome. I would say that's what it means to walk by faith. And it's what we do as believers. We don't walk by doubt. We don't walk by worry. We don't walk by anxiety. We walk by faith. Hey, people that don't know God, let them walk by doubt. And let them walk by anxiety, because that's all they have. But when you've got Christ in your life, you can walk by faith. And our goal is we want to see more and more people walk by faith. That's why when we come on the radio, text some folks. Say, hey, check it out. We're on AM, FM, Facebook, and YouTube. Pick one and get on board and see what God has for you. Okay? Now, you know the demise of a person begins very small and then increases sometimes rapidly. A lot of times, the fall of a person is not obvious in the beginning. It's a very small step. Think of a storm. It begins with a small cloud, and then the cloud gets bigger, and then there's more clouds, and then the storm breaks out. But it started off really small. And that can happen when we fail to learn from our mistakes. You know what happens? Another cloud comes, and another one. And before you know it, boom, the storm hits. This is the weather that we have control over. We can't control the weather outside, but we can control the weather in our soul. And how do we control it? How do we stop the storm from coming into our soul? Learn from your mistakes before they turn into bigger ones and bigger ones. Okay, all that's an introduction to where we're going today. Let's take a look at Joseph. Genesis 37. I'm going to use the contemporary English version translation because it reads nice and easy. Okay? Genesis 37, verse 1. Jacob lived in the land of Canaan, where his father Isaac had lived. Excuse me. And this is the story of his family. When Jacob's son Joseph was 17 years old, he took care of the sheep with his brothers, the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah. But he was always telling his father all sorts of bad things about his brothers. Now Jacob, Joseph's father, you know what? He didn't honor the biblical mandate for marriage. One man, one woman. You know what he did? One man, two women. He took two wives. It caused him some big trouble. Isn't one enough trouble? Only kidding. Oh, I love this program. Because Jacob had two wives, it resulted in a family where Leah, wife number one, had sons. Rachel, wife number two, had sons. He even had some concubines. I'm like, what? Concubines? They had sons. What a world. And Joseph was the son of Rachel and the favorite to her and Jacob. And this created great friction among the other sons. You know, the name Jacob means deceiver or conniver. And he certainly lived up to this when he cheated his brother Esau out of his birthright for a pot of stew. He manipulated his father, Abraham, into giving him the double portion of the inheritance. Isaac. He entered into polygamy. All of these things are like not warranted. The family had become a very dysfunctional and divided family. You see, here's the thing. God knows what he's doing when he says one man for one woman, and the two shall become one. What God has joined together, let no one separate. God knows exactly the right formula for a healthy home. So we do not have a healthy home here, as you will see. But Joseph was always telling his father all sorts of bad things about his brothers. It looks like Joseph was his father's little spy, spying on the brothers. Verse 3, Jacob loved Joseph more than he did any of his other sons, because Joseph was born after Jacob was very old. And Jacob had given Joseph a fancy coat. You heard of the coat of many colors? It was a fancy coat. Probably had nice buttons on it. And he gave him the fancy coat to show that he was his favorite son. And so Joseph's brothers hated him, and they wouldn't be friendly to him. You know, it's not easy to manage a blended family. It's very common today. Guy meets girl. He's got kids. She's got kids. First marriages didn't work out for whatever reason. They get married, blending the families together. I'll tell you, this is why it takes real thought and concern. Don't think it's an easy thing. Matter of fact, I have a CD on the blended family. And if anybody's interested, if you know someone or if you are struggling with a blended family, got some issues going on there, maybe there's some partiality, maybe there's some disagreement on how to bring up the kids, this CD will help you. We'll send it out to you free. Okay? We'll give it out to you free. Call us at 508-324-4500. New Hope Christian Church will send you the CD. And I think it'll help you. The blended family. Okay? Because we need to be instructed on how to blend families. Jacob, I wish he had this CD because he really made a mess of his family. he planted two ideas in his sons' hearts. Number one, he made Joseph very prideful. He singled him out as the favorite son. And you know what happened? That gave Joseph an elevated sense of importance. Joseph strutting his stuff. I'm the favorite. I'm higher than everybody else, you know? And you know the other thing that Jacob did? He turned his sons against Joseph with feelings of rejection. They felt second class. They're like, hey, you made Joseph your favorite. What does that make us? Your non-favorite. So there was this divide between Joseph and all the other brothers. This family became a breeding ground for hatred, bitterness, and jealousy. You know, I wonder how many families look like Jacob's family even today. And maybe that's why this series will be helpful. I know it will. Stay with me every day. And that CD can be helpful. The whole story of Joseph is negative all the way through till we get to the very end. Thankfully, it has a happy ending. But to get to the ending, oh man, it's drudgery all the way through. Nothing good. Nothing good's happening till we get to the very end. This would be an awesome movie, but Hollywood would ruin it anyway. So don't bother. So one night, Joseph had a dream. And the next day, he gathered his brothers together to tell them about the dream. And he said, we were out in the field, tying bundles of wheat, and my bundle stood up, and your bundles bowed down to it. That's not a dream you tell to people that hate you. His brothers asked, do you really think you're going to be king and rule over us? Because that's what it signified. Now they hated Joseph more than ever because of what he had said about the dream. Now Joseph's head seems to be inflating. He's getting a big head, pride and ego. Did he sense that his brothers are hating him? Did he learn that it wasn't a good idea to share dreams like that? Not yet. Guess what? He had another dream. And he didn't learn from the first one. He went out and found his brothers. Said, guys, guess what? I had another dream. Want to hear it? They're like, no. Well, you're going to hear it anyway. He told his brothers, the sun, the moon, and the stars. They all bowed down to him. Sun represented his father. Moon represented his mother. The stars represented his brothers. And then he told his father the dream. And his father basically said to him, are you out of your mind? Do you think your mother and I are going to bow down to you? You know, Joseph's not learning. He lived life on a different plane than his brothers and his parents. He was like in another world. And his experience of special treatment had become the expectation. You know, he's like, hey, man, I'm the favorite. I can say what I want. I can do what I want. The favorite always gets away with everything. And the favorite has great expectations. The favorite has a sense of entitlement. And that's what happened to Joseph. Now, I wonder, did that ever happen to you? Do you ever have a sense of entitlement? Say, someone may do something for you a few times and then you begin to expect it. That ever happen? Maybe they bring you a cup of coffee at work one day, and then another day they bring you a cup of coffee. And then another. Let's say they do it for like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, right? Every day they bring you a cup of coffee. And now you start to expect it. And then Friday they don't bring you one. And you're like, hey, don't you bring coffee anymore? Are you mad at me? Did I say something? Did I do something? It's like, you see what happens? We develop this sense of expectancy because of people's goodness, so now we start to expect it all the time. I think that's where Joseph was. Now Joseph's brothers, they're really getting jealous of him. And his father kept wondering about the dream. We will visit this dream at the end of the series. Don't you worry. Right, Linda? Checking in. Right. Joseph's dreams, they did predict the future, where he would rise to greatness. But you see, instead of keeping them to himself, he flaunted them. There are things that we need to keep to ourselves. There are things that we should not flaunt. If you get a raise at work, don't flaunt it to other people. Know what I mean? If you get a new desk, don't flaunt it. Hey, see my new desk? You know, don't. There are things that you get, but you don't flaunt. You don't make yourself feel big by making other people feel small. Okay? That's a good lesson in life. Don't make yourself feel big by making other people feel small. You know the best way to feel big? Help other people feel big. That's how you feel big. Here's the wisdom of Solomon. Let another praise you, and not your own mouth. A stranger, and not your own lips. That's good wisdom. If somebody's going to praise you, don't let it be you. Let it be somebody else, not you. So Joseph made 3 mistakes. Number 1, he lacked discernment. Discernment is simply the ability to judge well. That's discernment, to judge a situation properly. The Bible tells us in Proverbs 10:13, on the lips of the discerning, wisdom is found. Oh, but a rod is for the back of him who lacks understanding. So I like what discernment is, the ability to judge well. Let me throw out a little exhortation to all of you Facebookers, you people on Facebook. You need to remember this. I've seen so many foolish posts on Facebook. They're actually embarrassing. I mean, I've seen where people argue with each other. Family members air their dirty laundry on Facebook. I'm like, what? Why are you doing that? Calling each other out on Facebook. What? You don't put your dirty laundry out for the whole world to see. Number 1, we don't want to see it. We don't care. And number 2, you're embarrassing yourself. You're making a fool of yourself. And yet people can post things that they put dirty jokes. Christians put dirty jokes and they're not embarrassed. Like what? Where's your discernment? You need to have discernment on Facebook. Look at the situation that you are in and act accordingly. Don't just be yourself all the time. Okay. The second mistake that Joseph made, he lacked sensitivity. He didn't consider the impact of his words on others. When he told the dreams to his brothers, he didn't consider, being the favorite, how it would hurt them. Sometimes people say, hey, I'm just being honest. Remember this, truth must always be seasoned with salt. You can be honest, but don't be inflammatory. The Bible says, let your speech always be with grace, as though seasoned with salt, so that you shall know how you should respond to each person. John said that Jesus came full of grace and truth. Oh, he had truth. He was the truth. But he came with grace. Grace must accompany truth. You know, when we were little kids, we had to take an aspirin when we were sick, and we didn't like it. It tastes nasty. So what did our mothers do? They got a little spoon of jelly, and they crushed up the aspirin, put it in the spoon of jelly, and then you ate it. The jelly was the grace. The aspirin was the truth. You put them together, it's not that bad. It'll do its job, you see. The third mistake that Joseph made, he lacked maturity. Any of you ever have that, jelly and aspirin? Let us know if you did. Say, I had jelly and aspirin when I was a little kid. Check us out. He demonstrated that he wasn't yet ready for the promotion that God was going to give him. You know, God was going to give Joseph a really big promotion. Man, bigger than anybody could ever imagine. But right now, he's not ready. Joseph's going to school. And in our next few sessions together, Joseph's going to be in school. He's going to be tutored by God. And he's going to be prepared for something great. But first, he's going to suffer pain. You know why? Because pain can bring the greatest life lessons. But here it is, if you learn. If you learn from your pain, you will be very, very wise and discerning, and you will be ready for the promotion. Well, we're going to see how Joseph fares through all of his tutoring by God. Okay? This series is about learning from your mistakes. It's not the end when you make a mistake. It's only the end when you fail to learn from it and you repeat the same mistake over and over and over again. Joseph had a lot to learn. But the good news is he will learn. That's the good news. Next time we're together, which would be probably, could be tomorrow. Joseph goes to school. Oh yeah, the school has already started. But now the work is going to get more difficult. And that's why this is Joseph's story could be our story. You know that? The story of Joseph could be the story of you and me, because we all go through similar life lessons. And the key is we want to learn from those lessons. That's what we want to do. We want to learn from the life lessons that God brings us through. Hey, let me remind you tonight, Survey of the Bible right here at New Hope on Route 6 in Swansea. If you're in the area, come on out and join us. If you're not, you can find us on YouTube and Facebook tonight, 7 o'clock. We're going to take a look at a comparison of the four Gospels. Why do we have four Gospels? How are they the same? How are they different? What's the purpose of four different accounts of Christ? Who wrote them? And what was the intention of each Gospel? Going to be very academic, very informative. Join us tonight here at New Hope, Route 6 in Swansea, or on YouTube or Facebook at newhopecc.tv. Click YouTube or Facebook. Thank you for joining me today. I'll see you next time, maybe tomorrow, for more of New Hope Radio. Have a great day.